We spent a little bit of time talking about classifying triangles. This will be a real quick video review. You've done this before of how to classify quadrilaterals. Polygons kind of talk about how to name them based on the suffix gon and how many sides there are. For quadrilaterals though, you essentially have two groups within the quadrilaterals. You have quadrilaterals that don't fit either of these groups, but within the two major groups that we're going to focus on are parallelograms and trapezoids. Trapezoids you classify by how many parallel sides there are. Same thing with parallelograms. Notice trapezoid is one pair of parallel sides, parallelogram is two pairs of parallel sides. Then you have quadrilaterals that have no parallel sides at all. Those just called quadrilaterals. Within the parallelograms you have special groups that you have rhombuses, rhombusi, whatever, and you have rectangles. Notice rhombuses have 4 equal sides, rectangles has 4 equal angles, squares have both, so that's why they meet in the union of these two circles. Another way to look at this is another diagram. By the way, the last video you needed to go back and you needed to write down those definitions. In this diagram, notice how we have everything pointed back toward quadrilaterals. You have trapezoids, parallelograms, and then underneath, the bottom here is the square. That's the most specific. It's kind of like when we classified numbers and we talked about irrational and rational. Irrational would be like our trapezoid group. There's not as many of them. It's only one pair of parallel sides. Parallelogram, this is a little bit more specific. You have 2 pairs of parallel sides. That's where we're going to spend the majority of our time, is on parallelograms, rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. Couple little information here you need to highlight some of this stuff. Properties of parallelograms. This is very important. You have opposite sides have the same length and opposite angles have the same measure. Take a look at the symbols in the diagram there. Notice the arrows. The arrows are symbols that sides are parallel, so you're going to see those again. Notice the top and the bottom are parallel, so they have one arrow. That arrow just signifies that those two sides are parallel with each other. Double arrows on the sides. That shows you that the sides are parallel, but they're not parallel to the single arrow sides. Okay, so 2 arrows would mean a different group of parallel sides. Look at the angles. The arc, single arc, shows in the top right and bottom left show us that single arc shows us that these are equal angles. Notice how the bottom right and top left, the different angles that are equal, those obtuse angles, those have 2 arcs to show that they're equal to each other but not to the single arc angles. Okay. A couple other things to highlight here. Parallelogram, just some definitions here. 2 pairs of parallel sides. Trapezoid is 1 set. For a rectangle, you have 4 congruent angles. Rhombus is congruent sides. Square is both. Make sure you know the difference. Okay? If it's a rectangle, the only way it's also a rhombus is if it's a square. This gets a little bit confusing, but the only way you can write rectangle and rhombus when classifying these is if it has it meets both, if it's a square. Okay. If it's a parallelogram, you can't say it's a trapezoid. It's kind of like with numbers. If it's rational, you can't also write irrational. So be careful when you're going through and classifying these.